Hey guys, it's Andrew from PopMech, and it's time for this week's edition of 3 Things We Learned About Star Trek Discovery. Number 1, we finally got the appearance of con man Harry Mudd. We knew this was coming ever since they announced that Rainn Wilson from The Office was going to be cast in this role, that they were bringing back this sort of dashing rogue outlaw from 2 or 3 episodes of the original series to be in Discovery. And we knew since they cast a relatively famous actor, it was going to be a little more than a cameo. Indeed, that's what we got in the 5th episode of Star Trek Discovery, which is called Choose Your Pain. Captain Lorca, captain of USS Discovery, gets abducted by the Klingons. He ends up on a Klingon prison transport, and inevitably he gets thrown into a cell with some other people, including our man, the space pirate, Harry Mudd. In the original series, he's kind of a fop, more of a goofy rogue than an actual hardened criminal or con man. In the case of Discovery, the show is a little darker, has a little bit more of an edge than what we've seen from Star Trek so far. Rainn Wilson kind of portrays him with the same sort of edge. He's sort of goofy and larger than life, but he also is kind of selling them out and has some deep, dark secrets of his own. So it's interesting to see where that's going to go. He sort of, at the end of the episode, as we see the captain and another Starfleet officer get away, you see him shouting through the prison cell door that he's going to meet up with Lorca again. So you got to presume that that's true, that we haven't seen the last of Mr. Mudd and he's going to show up again before Discovery is over. Number 2, we learned some more interesting stuff about Spore Drive, the magical sort of scientific transportation system that Discovery has invented to basically be able to teleport anywhere in the galaxy at any given time. We found out last week that it's based on a sort of giant bear-sized version of a tardigrade. A tardigrade is a real microscopic creature that exists on Earth. It's an extremophile in that it can exist in very extreme temperatures. It has all kinds of crazy characteristics. In Discovery, it turns out that Spore Drive works sort of with this creature where it is connected at a deep level to the spores that have roots that extend all over the galaxy, and that's how this thing works. It's a bit of Star Trek technobabble, pseudoscience. What's cool about episode 5 is that they get into a little bit deeper of the real science about it. You see the tardigrade that they use to do this transportation system be harmed and almost killed every time they use the Spore Drive. And at the end of it, it kind of goes into this deep hibernation. Earth scientists have found real versions of this tiny thing where it goes into, it gets dehydrated and it goes into this kind of super hibernation, and they've been able to revive them 3 decades later. The thing can survive in the vacuum of space. It's super tough. So that's true to that little bit of Star Trek. The other piece of real science that they get into is there's a bit of hand-wavy science, but they start talking about horizontal gene transfer, and the way that Spore Drive works is apparently that the giant tardigrade brings in different parts of different genetic material into itself in order to make this work. And what they're basing that on is that in real life, scientists have found that tardigrades have a pretty high percentage of their DNA that seems to have come from different creatures. Discovery is also clearly getting into deep questions about what is a life form, what is life, and what is our responsibility to other forms of life in the universe. That's always been a core question at the heart of Star Trek, and it reminds us a lot of some of the episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation where they're debating, does Starfleet own Data because he's a robot, and does Starfleet own other forms of artificial life that work for it, or should we stall these big scientific projects because it puts small life forms in danger? You're clearly getting that as sort of the main thread of the old style of Star Trek that's running through Discovery now that we've got this big tardigrade that drives their science project that looks like it's going to win the war but is clearly hurt by what they're doing to it. As we saw at the end of episode 5, they're now experimenting with different ways to see if they can do Spore Drive without the ethical quandary of experimenting on this animal. And one way that happens at the end of this one is that Stamets, the guy who invented this technology, tests it on himself and nearly kills himself. So we'll be getting into some deeper, more philosophical questions as Discovery goes on. And then number 3, we need to talk about the Mirror Universe. If you were a fan of the original series, you might remember the Mirror Mirror episode. That's the one where they go to this parallel universe and there's evil Spock with a beard. That universe was carried over into several episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It showed up again in the Enterprise series that aired 10 or 12 years ago. The reason this is important is at the end of episode 5, you see Stamets. He's been sort of revived after his experience of sort of plugging Spore Drive into himself. The doctor has looked him over, and it seems that he's all good, but they intentionally end the episode with this ominous note where he stares into the mirror and he does this weird little evil smirk. So given that Discovery has tried to bring in a lot of new elements, tried to do some different things that Star Trek hasn't done before, but has also been really keen on dropping in little Easter eggs from previous series, it seems logical that they are going to go and experiment with that a little bit. What's interesting is that there's so much of that on television right now. You've kind of got the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks that was just revived. The Upside Down from Stranger Things has a sort of evil parallel universe thing going on with it. And now Star Trek, which was doing this stuff in the 1960s, it seems like Discovery is going to bring that back. So we'll find out next week, and we'll talk at you then about episode 6. Thanks, guys.